Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking about the Risk Intelligence Forecast for 2024 with Cory Bergman. Cory, lots of great information there in the first and especially the second segment there. Now let's pick another one of the findings in the report, and that is geopolitics.
Yeah, just a little bit going on in that world. Uh, yeah, there's just the Russia-Ukraine event was just a seismic change, and then to have something in the Middle East with the Hamas attack on Israel and all the fallout, everything else. Well, then you have just the China-Taiwan continuing tensions. You have the rise of BRICS, the nations that are creating their own economic relationship from Brazil to China to India, Saudi Arabia, and it continues to expand. And so a lot of new dynamics out there. If you're a global company, there's just a lot of variables that suddenly come into play. But geopolitics used to be something that obviously impacted everyone, but because companies have such a wide, people all around the world, they have supply chains all around, everything becomes so much more interconnected, and things just seem to be happening faster than they used to happen with more variables at play. And so there's that quote, Bloomberg did this story, and the writer said, "Nothing worries CEOs right now as much as geopolitics." And that's, you think about that, it actually, there's a lot of truth there. And I think that I look at this as an opportunity in many cases for folks that work in security, work in business continuity resilience, to become really the source of that information internally. Because it becomes more difficult to find really well-written, concise, factual information about what's happening in the world and how it impacts your company. There's lots of consultants that are out there would love to do it for you. So why not your department take the lead on that and offer that reporting to your leadership? And I think that's something that's a really, big opportunity, because this uncertainty is not going to stop. It's going to be continuing to get more complicated. North Korea, just in the past couple of weeks, has all of a sudden ramped up again. There's always something somewhere, and there's a lot out there. And I think, especially as you look at, you talked about the fragmentation of social media. We've talked about how people can live in their own filter bubbles. And so the ability to sort of transcend that and be very objective about what's happening in the world and how it impacts your company, and to be able to offer that as a service internally, I think would be just a tremendous resource, and would allow these teams, these security teams, for example, not to be cost centers, but really to be opportunity centers, and they have a much wider footprint and have a seat at the table like they've never had before.
I remember last year having a conversation with someone where they said that executives, what kept them up at night back then, about a year and a half ago, was cyber attacks.
Mm.
Now it's the geopolitics and then cyber attacks,
Yeah.
because in some of these geopolitical events, we've got actual national governments now sponsoring cyber events. Not not crime syndicates.
Right, and that's all interconnected, right? So I think you've looked at Microsoft just recently announced a bit of a challenge there from what they believe to be from Russia, and so it's nation states taking on big companies and big platforms, and it all comes together. And so I just think that understanding how these events unfold and having just I think a real cadence of reporting around it is just going to be really helpful for those in decision-making positions.
Just out of curiosity, any suggestions on how to report that to executives? Because business continuity, disaster planners, emergency response, a lot of times we get labeled, oh, the doom and gloom guys. Like,
Yeah.
oh, Sally's going to come over and tell us everything is wrong again, and watch out for that. But then we look at the news and things really are going, to pot. So on one hand, people don't want to listen to us. They go the other direction when they see us coming down the hallway, or ignore the emails. And now on the news, something is really playing out in real time. So what's the best way to really get that message across, saying that, hey, I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I am really trying to point out the risks to our organization. What's any suggestions on how to go about that?
Well, that's a great question. Um, it's yes, but during peaceful times it's easier because then you can be the steady hand in the room. I mean, take advantage of the opportunities in which something is overhyped to say this we believe to be overhyped, and keep an eye on it, but it's not that big a deal. I think that goes a long way in establishing some credibility there. But just be straightforward, concise in writing. Don't belabor it. Understand what type of reporting and in what format your audience wants to have. I think it's really important. If somebody doesn't want like a daily cadence or a weekly cadence, they want something on a monthly cadence, and then adapt to provide that. Really customize that to different audiences, I think is important. And so, and yeah, I think that's to know your audience and just really clear, concise, straightforward, blunt, boring, almost in some cases, writing, so that you have a little bit of headroom. So when there really is something that it needs to have urgent action taken, that you can ramp up in that context without it already being at that pitch, and so that they understand that this new thing really is much more important than the existing things that you've been reporting on for the past 6 months or so. But yeah, it is a challenge.
Yeah, I know I've worked with executives that, oh yeah, business continuity is important to disaster recovery, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you point out some things, it's like, oh, you're so doom and gloom. Well, wait a minute. Now you're the opposite end of the spectrum. So, how do I, and it was a challenge. How do I communicate this to you so that it grabs your attention so we get the support and resources we need? Right?
Yeah, I think in it kind of ebbs and flows too, I think, right? Because there's some circumstances in which everybody really is realizing that something is important and there is a hunger for information about it. And then kind of the in-between periods, they may not want the 20th report on, what's happening in Russia, Ukraine. They've moved on. And so I think it's kind of be able to sense, what the need is and being able to adapt to it, I think would be helpful too.
Yeah. The next one I really want to talk about is the election super cycle.
Yeah, we got through whatever random chain of events, we have elections in more than 50 countries, which I believe is a record. And so,
Mhm.
some are presidential, some are legislative, some are regional, but there's clearly the quote from the Economist was more than half the people on the planet live in countries that will hold nationwide elections in 2024. But by far the most important contest, America's presidential election will be so poisonous and polarizing, it will cast a pall over global politics. That from the editor-in-chief of The Economist. And certainly in Davos just recently, a lot of the discussion was what's going to happen in the United States. Obviously, that election has so many different ramifications downstream for so many other countries. And so with so many elections going on and a very large one in the US, a lot of focus is going to be on that. The US, of course, has now a legal aspect of it with the potential Supreme Court ruling that will have very large impact. And so just in the US, I mean, there's going to be, as I write, just, a lot of pretty much a media circus at every turn. There's just going to be a lot of attention there. It's going to be a lot of information, a lot of it bad and polarizing on the
Mhm.
internet.
Mhm.
You're going to have workforces that are going to have split opinions. You have to kind of deal with that. You're going to protest. They're going to have some sort of impact. And so it's going to be a very active year. Other countries, Taiwan just had an election. You've got others. You've got India coming up, got Mexico coming up. So some big, important elections that could either lean toward a more democratic country or toward a more autocratic populist country. And so there's going to be, at the end of the year, we'll see how much of the complexion has changed.
And these elections, depending on where they are and the way they unfold, could impact other things that are going on, our businesses, our supply chains, all those sort of aspects, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. In looking at the long-term trend from globalization to regionalization, I really think that's going to continue. And the nearshoring phenomenon around that as well, which started with COVID and now is just going to be driven by politics and how countries team up, and how the US's willingness and capacity to be the enforcer of keeping supply chains running. And so you've seen, a lot of impact with the Red Sea and the attacks from the Houthis and the U.S. response, and who would have thought that would happen this
Hmm.
year? It's just really surprising to see, and everything is just so interconnected. That sprang out of the Hamas attack, but that also had, it had some sort of background to it as well. So we'll see where this lands, but kind of going back to the geopolitics point, everybody's got their wants to know what the new developments are.
Well, the way I see this sometimes is these other events occur because everybody is looking somewhere else at another event. So they take advantage of these events. So the
Right.
more events that we have, I think more will be occurring.
Absolutely. Right. So someone's attention is diverted, or they just have limited resources. And so,
Mhm.
on top of all that, and the funny thing is, we haven't even talked about at all, even up to this point, about climate and how climate plays into so much of this as well. And countries that all of a sudden have diminishing resources because of droughts, and because they have the lower food production, and the dynamics that changes. You have migration that fuels populism, populist governments. Um, all these, there's so much happening, and that's really the kind of the lead from this is there's just so much uncertainty in so many different directions that something can go, that it's becoming hard to keep tabs of everything.
We've got 4 minutes left, so let's take a quick chat about one more. How about burnout epidemic? Let's talk about Ebola.
Perfect segue. There's too much going on. Can't keep up. And then burnout. Yeah, there's really boy, if you have a team that works in risk intel or focused on any of this, over time it begins to take a toll. Um, and we certainly see it here with our team that has to keep tabs of what's happening in real time, and being able to give them the space to be able to kind of take a break. And so the I think what's the problem in the past has been that burnout has been kind of like a side effect and dealt with as kind of a sort of a side effect, but it's become really central. It's become a core operational issue. If you want to have a team that's productive, burnout isn't a distraction anymore. It's something you have to preemptively focus on, because otherwise it's going to disrupt your operations. And so it's really being able to understand what those warning signs are, and providing the resources that employees need to be able to cope, and then really just the flexibility to take a break as they need it. But this is especially for folks who are glued to the internet during these times. It all adds up.
And I want to stress too that the burnout piece, as you said, providing the right resources for employees, that goes for all levels of the organization. It's not just management making sure non-management individuals have the resources, but everyone has those resources. A CEO can be just as burnt out as the newest person in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think back to the years of working in newsrooms, and there's a lot of similarities of just how everyone kind of feels like that if you say that you're burned out is a sign of weakness, and so you don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think when people start talking about it, they realize that everybody's wrestling with this, and some folks really need to find some help, and that's good, and that's okay, and that's encouraged. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have 2 minutes left. Would you like to have any final thoughts, maybe on the report or something we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I think what, like I mentioned before, I think it's really big. The key thing is to kind of have information you can trust as your starting point, to be able to synthesize that well, to be able to then be able to expand your remit as a team in your organization. There's an opportunity there to really become a source of truth to your executive team, to other teams that might want that information. In some cases, this might not be some sort of formal thing that begins. It might be some sort of informal thing that you do just as an experiment, gather feedback, iterate on it. But I think there's really a lot of opportunity there moving ahead. No one is going to have a magic bullet for everything that's happening. No one's going to have the solution for everything that's going to happen. There's no way to know in advance of all these things going to happen, but you can certainly be in a position to have really, you have information integrity in place, that you know that you have a source of information you trust, They have access to that, and of course, all the planning that you do on the business continuity side for communications and for the ability to get people quickly engaged. And so I think it's going to be an interesting year with a lot in play. And one of the other pieces that I talk about here is collaboration. I think the collaboration is key both internally and across companies. The companies, with their faced with a common crisis, they can work together. That's not, that you're not giving up trade secrets by working together to keep your staff safe. Absolutely, that's encouraged, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Now, we only touched on, I think, 7 items out of the 15. So if people want to find out what the other items are and read the report, they go to factal.com.
Factal.com, look across the top, and there's a link right there.
And I recommend the report, have a read, and I'm sure some people will certainly understand some of those things when they get to it, like, oh, that looks familiar. Oh, yeah, we're experiencing that right now. There were a few of those when I read going, oh, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Cory, and I really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise, and congratulations on the report and all the findings. And everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.